When you're looking at narrative, I think that as well. When you're looking at narrative, essentially what you're doing is looking at the trends that were formed, right? So I'm looking at this leg to determine what kind of structure goes into it, right? Do we have this? And then what's the reaction out of it, right? So I look at this as higher time frame. I look at this as lethargic. I look at this kind of had its own thing in there. This was kind of higher time frame delivery as well. But I basically look at the last few trend legs to determine what I expect to happen, or at least the possibilities that would have happened. For example, if we failed hard in here, and we still have 3 minutes to do so, then no question we take this low. Because this movement, higher time frame, retracement, gone. Right? This barely traded into this zone. So I'm looking at the last, like if I look at this entire area, this really sticks out to me. Right? Nothing else is really as clean of an area of interest. You know, I suppose you could argue that this was a zone we flipped there, but that was just mitigating the area that we left from. So it's not like it's not like I zoom out for a few hours or whatever. I look at what sticks out the most to me on the chart. Right? And then I kind of try and figure out what the higher time frames want to do based off of what our lower time frame is doing. Right? So for example, I liked this area a lot for short for many reasons, and yet our lower time frame is showing complete opposite of the order flow that will be consistent with that narrative. Right? So therefore I needed to see something drastic and then a retest to get short. Right? Otherwise I would have, well, you could even have argued this initial touch gotten short. Right? The whole premise again is we've left this down here now, which it might come back for. I can see that. That's probably the most common issue that people have with price action. That's probably the most common issue, I'd say. Right? Because you start to see a lot more, especially if you kind of woke up one morning and you're like, oh, I see this, so I see that. What about this here? What about that there? Right? And if you're drawing pockets, you might draw pockets like this, where you're riding it up to your objective. Ooh. You guys in your orange folders. You love them, eh? Like, what is it? This is just flying, 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 flying. Urge. These pocket trades can be tricky. These pocket trades can be really tricky. When you're shorting violently a movement. But look at this. Do I take Asia and London highs and lows? I take what they're doing into consideration. I think that it's definitely good to have them on the chart as areas to reach for. For example, you would have overnight high here, and I think that especially on ES, I think the majority, I mean vast majority of days will take the high or the low of overnight. Like almost always type thing. Like I'm talking maybe 80% of days, if you go through your charts, you'll find that. The problem with that way of thinking is that, what usually happens is people will see the overnight high, say here, and they lose what price is actually doing, because now you've got like this magnet that you're attacking and then getting stopped out, attacking and then getting stopped out as it comes for the other one. Right? We've got no structure in this actually. Right? So yeah, I think that when I have these areas of interest, and this might drop down to clear out this, and deliver a 1-to-1 on that perhaps, but I think that it's nice having like what we're shooting for. And if you need to figure out why, look at yesterday where we had these highs from Friday. We basically took it and then violently sold off. Now, if you didn't know that was your narrative you were reaching for, you were in a world of hurt. Right? I'm hands off of longs here, even if this does go higher, and the reason is because I didn't like the personality change of how we spooled short there. It might tap into this if we see major failure or something out of this at like the high 60s, then I think we go much lower. That might have been the retracement back in already. We'll see. I'm hands off. I got 10 seconds till 650 or 950. Sorry. Right, here's your 5-minute candle. Nothing really toppy just yet, but we'll see. Yeah, failure is a really good concept to define. I look at failure as not touching in and trading away, right? That to me isn't failure. That's could be profit taking. What I want to see for failure, for example, in this short, is I need to see an attempt to continue the trend that cannot. So it's not this, right? You might have the entry of this area if it can't close outside of the pocket. Fair enough. Right? But confirmation of failure is when it tries to rally and continue the trend. And I mean a genuine attempt. For example, like sweeping, failing underneath here, trying to go long and garbage, right? Tries to go long here, death. That to me is major failure. Right? It's not the candle itself, it's the response. Right? These attempted to reverse this movement, and what did we find? We found this candle that swept underneath here and closed here. Goodbye. Right? No valid points heading up. Do you anticipate we'll run those once we get a valid high put in here on the 1 or the 5 minute? Depends on the time frame of the failure, right? And what sort of movement we have coming down. If we start seeing something like this, then we'll probably get another shove. And then if that fails, then we run them. There's always a chance that we just have a higher time frame drop, and you saw that yesterday. Where was it? Right, where we just have no structure, we flip bearish, and then just cataclysmically dropped into everything. Right, so there's a little bit of recency bias with that as well. You might get your longs out like from these liquidity movements, but I think as we have no valid swings in here until this, and you can even argue that once it was taken, it actually traded back in already. I think we just dropped lower now. Right. How can you distinguish between lethargic PA and accumulation? Typically, accumulation will have valid highs and valid lows without breaking structure. Right? So this would be a change in order flow, right? And you're looking for that trade back in to go lower, right? The problem I have is that this is a nice sell-off from our pocket here, but I just don't like anything about this high that was put in yet. Right, so that did end up delivering to the low of the zone. And if you're looking for you're looking for higher time frame movement. So this candle that opens, trades lower, trades through. We didn't get our sweep, right? Obviously, we're not tapping into anywhere specific. You could probably mark up some sort of pocket here from this movement. But I just don't like the order flow changing here. So I'm on hands for at least another 5 minutes. Right? And you're seeing the trade back in, possibly. Now, if this candle can close strongly and we get follow through, we need follow through. We expect there to be some sort of selling because of this selling here. and the fact that we broke the low to put it in. Right? So this is the tap back in, and if we get a body closure underneath this, I think that'll be extremely strong for the bearish price action. Yeah, 10 seconds. And I think what happens in here is going to be very telling, right? So obviously that opened 45.25, that closed at 45. So buy a tick. Buy a tick. But again, you're seeing body closure above this, body closure under that. So you're seeing a little bit of range-bound PA. And if you look, what's the pocket of this there? Which is one way of distinguishing range. Right? So now you're looking at this. Where would you expect to get held up? Right here. Which might trade back up to the high 50s. Right? I personally don't like that closed underneath there.
Order submitted. Target filled.
Right? So if you are long, your target's probably this. If it blasts through everything, you might consider holding for a little bit higher, but that's based off of your 5 and your 15. Right? This will be a good example of accumulation, yes. Right? Uncertain of which way it's going to go, which means people will be quick to take their profits on either side. There's your 58.75. Sorry, 58.50. Missed it by a tick. There it goes. Right? And you'd argue this high is now weak. Right? I mean, technically it's not until you get a bear bar and a body closure above it. In this case, it would have to close above the actual bear bar. But
order submitted. Target filled.
Either way, this is obviously unclear. You need a change in a personality in order to determine whether we're going higher or lower. And until then, people will short above and they'll buy below. That doesn't mean you have to. That doesn't mean you have to. You can certainly practice on sim one way or the other if you're not trading your valuations and whatnot. Right? But you can see the pockets on either side being respected. When you've got a range, you want to see something like you would expect, right? So this trades up, fails. That's what you expect out of a range, right? Or this trades down and then fails, right? You expect the ranges to be tested on either side. Right? So there's no one specific thing that's going to be a change in personality per se. Right? So you see a lot, how many people sold that extreme? They're already up. quite a few points. Now, if we start defending the midpoint, or we start getting, like, our expectation of the bear bar is this, because that's what we've been shown, right? Like, get rid of all that. We want this. If we get something that looks like that, then we can look at the bearish side not being as strong as what it was, right? And if we're seeing continual attempts to sell off here and we can barely trade below, say, 58, that's a change in personality, because we're expecting this and we're getting sideways at the top of the range. Right? Consider that there has to be something significant to make people want to buy up here or cover their positions, or both. Right? So in short, you want to expect the market to continue what it's doing until it's really screaming at you that it wants to do something else. And what ended up happening? This bar closed weak. We swept below it. Immediate reaction up. Right? Forming a crappy bull bar. Immediate reaction is down. It's all information. All information. Right? You've got this. You've got that pretty much. Right, so last manipulation was higher. We're now trading lower. We would expect at least to take this low. If we can't, that's something else. Right? Algorithmically, if we're shorting in here, we're looking at the 23.6. So 41.75. Taking our profits off. Why? Because we're not expecting death. Now, yes, we do have a double top, and if we get higher time frame delivery, at one point, one of these sides will be right. And one of these candles will close either up here or like down here. And you put yourself on the right side of that movement by trading the failure extremes. And then over time, with order flow training and watching live price action, you'll be able to see what that change looks like, what it feels like. And it's going to be mainly based off of feel. And I use feel because you'll be able to see the adjustment in how many orders are flying through. And that's when you're expecting a large movement. As you guys know that have been here for a while, we expect 1.5 times the order flow to break out of this range. So when the order book really speeds up, that's look out. Right? And that's why I was actually avoiding any longs in here. I saw how fast the order book was moving down from here. And that's significant because everybody would have been buying in here because that's what the market's been doing. Is this making sense? That's a very technical way of looking, right? And you might have different rule-based things where you're kind of going, well, if it fails 3 times, for example, to do X, then I'm not say, shorting this because it's already failed to do it twice. I would have expected it to go down. And that's fair. That's a decent rule-based system. But I think we can all agree if we identify this range, this is what? 20 points, 20 points, 20 points, 20 points. That's 80 points just in this alone. Right? Sometimes you get tight ranges of 10 points, and that's a little bit more difficult. Goodbye. What did we say? Body closure, change in personality. At some point, everybody shorting in here is going to be wrong. Right? So we got this up here. We have a 15-minute zone on there. I think we kind of do, don't we? You probably look at this one directional leg, which we just tapped into. But I'm seeing we didn't take any liquidity from yesterday's high yet. Show of hands, did you make any money in that range or at least stay out of trouble? Couple nice scalps. Sat out one scalp. Cool. Mainly looking for people staying out of trouble. If you stayed out of trouble with it, right, people will often be in late, like here, in the middle of the range. That's what we want to avoid. Right? If you're late in a range, then quite often, as people are taking profits, you're entering a position which will chop around before finally delivering and either stopping you out break even or taking a small loss or maybe a small win and then seeing it move there and you're going, well, God damn it. And now your mental capital is drained and you start making like one challenging decision or bad decision will fuel a second one and then a third one. And the best way of avoiding that is to know your system to the point where you don't make that bad decision in the first place. Sounds a lot easier said than done, obviously. Whoa. Whoa. She's moving to it. I hope not. We're seeing blips go down. I don't know if that's my connection. Hopefully it's not. Discord being Discord. Hey, Mikey. How did Asia go? Turn it off and I'll turn it back on. We good? Cool.
Order submitted. Target filled.
I'm sure you were. Guess what I was studying last night, Mikey? OT Yeats in the range.
Order submitted. Target filled.
Bang, 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 bang.
Order submitted. Target filled.
No, that's way above my pay grade, Nisnos. Right, so beautifully tapped into this area of interest from yesterday. We're starting to see similar to this. Right, after accumulation. So this is kind of danger should we trade below this. Then we got a higher time frame move coming down, probably to take all the lows from today.
Order submitted. Order submitted.
Getting held up nicely in here though. Right, looking for at least here at 503.
Target filled.
I was lonely. Aw, let's get some hugs for Stotts. Poor Stotts. Poor Stotts. Those of you guys that are watching the order flow in the dome, you're seeing very sporadic price action right now. Which means somebody's going to get wrecked when it starts speeding up. There's your 503. Not a thing. So you have to wonder, they're reaching for somewhere, aren't they? Right? Now here's the question. Do we have any cause at all to be confirmation short this entire way up? Our protected low is here. Right? So if you see some sort of failure, okay, this is a valid area to look for short. We've got a move, cool. But you're looking at any short as a scalp. Scalp to where? The prior range. You could actually argue that their protected low is actually down here now. Right? I didn't look and see if that closed underneath, which it did, which makes this protected and valid, right? So we don't have a valid high up here yet. This is actually our only swing up until this. Yeah, true RC. Yeah, up here. Right? So for confirmation, you would actually need this. So what you're doing with the changes in order flow is you're monitoring how this moves, and if this gets held up, then you're actually expecting higher because the short signal and setup didn't pan out. Right? We often study ways of getting into the market and then managing that trade. Cool. But playing defense, you could argue, is actually more beneficial to your capital. In some cases, it's not, when you're not allowing your winners to run with your systems. But well, in order to make a protected low, we would have had to have a valid high. This was our last structural candle. This one didn't close above it. It traded above it. It didn't close above it. So we would actually need a closure underneath 67.50, right? Which then puts in a new high, and then that becomes protected. Now we would actually expect this to have traded back in and then gone. We might still get that, in fairness. In fairness, right? And what did we not like about this? Regardless of what happened in here. Oops. We're not really wild about this as a high of day, are we? What do we want to see for a high of day? How does that look? Right? We're here. So don't expect a high a day, regardless of what your lower time frame structure is showing you here. There's a possibility that happens. Yeah, of course there is. Right? But what's more likely is that it either leaves it for later, or we just continue going. This is fun, isn't it? Those are the things to avoid. Now, I look at this as actually being bullish, but that's pain to sit through. Right? And in order for it to really turn bullish, you need that failure. And I'm talking like failure of like a bullish bar. And then everybody that's been scaling in short here just gets squeezed for the final move. Right? The problem with it is that this barely touched into the prior zone. It's now failed to make a new high, at least so far. We need a closure underneath this. But took this liquidity. That low was 89.75. Really nice push.
Order submitted. Order submitted. Order submitted.
I would think the main one is the last one. Didn't close below the prior wicks. You talking about this? Yeah, what you have right now is a range inside of this. This is your range. Nothing's closed above. We manipulated higher. You could even argue we should manipulate lower, but that's a tough bet given the trend, right? I need to have a second reason of trading down. Now, you could argue that as this is a valid zone, you've got your midpoint here. Does that line up with anything? Probably, right? So you've got this, right? So you got your midpoint here. And then you've got your area of interest, which is that. So it's actually just underneath it, actually. You could argue from here, making it a little bit closer. I just missed that. If it goes, great. It was off of my platform. If we close below 75, would you short a tap back into the zone to deliver us lower? You're looking at, if we close below here, you're looking at something like this. And you're actually stalking along to take you above this weak high. Right? We don't want this really being held up here. And we certainly don't want lethargic movement. You want, essentially what you want is this. Otherwise, you're looking at lower time frame movement to take you higher. Right? We consider internal structure as like kind of like your 1 minute time frame, and then what you're trying to do is determine what your intermediate time frame, so your 15 minute, is doing based off of what your 1 minute's doing. Right? So are we accumulating in here? And then we use the 1 minute to determine what that looks like. Right? We just swept underneath here. We're now trading back in. You might have waited for this, and that's fine. Your trade could be something like this. Your 24 points. And if you're wrong and we continue lower, then you're wrong and we continue lower. Right? You could be waiting for the pocket of your move here, and in which case you probably already just got tapped in. In fact, 66.50 is the midpoint, which is what I usually look at for these. And we would have got tapped in by a tick, and that's nearly 30 points there. Yes, and Nisno's pointed out as well, if we expect this to be a range, which we talked about, we just failed higher, we now just failed lower. And where do we go? Right back to the midpoint of it. So I'll be right back 1 second, guys, sorry. right. So like, going back to that idea, when you identify like a structural candle, where do you think they're going to be taking their profits? Right now, what ended up happening in this leg was we had a body closure above here. And you could look and say that dropped there, and now we're capped at the pocket up here. And that's probably fair if you're expecting lower prices. Right? But very dangerous is this couldn't close underneath. Yeah, I mean, if you want to go short, ideally, what are you looking at? Right? You're looking at, you want to be trading with the higher time frame. Whether the higher time frame is retracing or continuing short isn't relevant. You want the higher time frame to be moving down, not the lower time frame. Otherwise, we'd be looking at shorting here for 5 points. And that's valid, but you really got to be like on the ball with that. If that's your cup of tea, right? People are taking every lower time frame pullback and they're taking money in here as the narrative is now failed underneath, right? We're looking at that high. Right. I personally need something swept. I don't think this is going to be good enough, but if it continues delivering as it is, then fair enough. Right? I was looking to see if we took that one or not. And that's mainly because I see this as being a range right now as well. Right? The question would be, are we trading back to the midpoint of this zone for another failure? Or do we just blast now, which is viable? $520 probably on deck. Be interesting to see if we trade back into this and go or not.
Order submitted. Target filled. Order submitted. Order submitted. Target filled.
What are they gonna do?
Order submitted. Order submitted. Target filled. Order submitted. Order submitted.
She's got to go now if she's gonna go. Oh my goodness. Digging back into this area that sent us up. I think this is a viable long. But that's based off of us taking the high. If we continue to fail here, this might just dump. I'm definitely in for the squeeze though. And I'm break even underneath this candle. Or small loss, I should say. But this is not what I want to see so far. Really good defense. They've got to fly it now.
Target filled.
So far, yeah. Need this high and then by extension high a day. Wow.
Order submitted.
I took it off on that failure there. Will be very annoying if they recover this and then run it, but did not like the volatility that spiked down from. Pain trade, finally squeezed right above and then failed. Couldn't close bearish, so it's not like it's heavily bearish. I just didn't like the reaction from when I was expecting a blast through. My oh my. I thought I had an edge in here. I didn't like that reaction, so I got out. Personally. Right? No, I think you might get a small scalp back into this, but I'm not liking the prospect of going higher. Now, if we fail underneath this, then fair enough. But this tells me it wants to go lower, and the question is whereabouts. You know, do we take this low? Possibly. We just had a double top internally. Right? People will play the range one way or the other. Yeah, I think if it wants to go lower, then we're looking at a pretty good retracement. Right, we've actually got a lot to clean up lower other than this zone. We've got like these lows, which are beautiful. No structure in here. I would just be surprised if we didn't take this on a higher time frame before unloading, personally. Could be, for sure. Right, we're right inside of our of that area of interest that I had. Right, I didn't like those highs, but again, one news day this week. It could be building liquidity for both sides. Just having fun. Ooh, really good defense of that. Now what? I think we take this low at 66.50. But they're messing around. Messing around for sure. Right, candles closing on their lows, immediate reaction higher. Doesn't necessarily mean we're going flying, but it means that there's uncertainty for sure in the delivery.
Order submitted. Order submitted.
Yeah. Again, it's the response. It's the response that occurs.
Order submitted. Order submitted.
Mm-hmm. Very uncomfortable short, right? A lot of whipsawing back and forth. Structurally, we've got this movement down with its own. We got failure, drop, trade back in. We're expecting below this low here at 81. And there she goes. Right, so we've got this here, although I do think we're going to take this low. If we fail, we're going to fail in the low 70s here. But I think given this, that we have to go underneath it and possibly even a little bit deeper into this zone. But still sitting on my hands. Currently delivering short, but a little unclear what it wants to do. Right, if we were going to leave on a higher time frame, I would have expected something a little bit more by now. Right, which means that it might be waiting for the turn of the hour. And in that case, we probably drop into here underneath this low, and then we'll get a strong rally. And did they take it? Or are they going to leave it? There she goes.
Order submitted.
This is an aggressive long from the midpoint of that zone. You need follow through now off of failure.
Target filled.
Right? And then the confirmation would be the test back in. Ideally, we get a defense of this open, which would be 67.75, which is also this low. The reason behind this long is this midpoint. I suppose it would be there. I didn't even touch it, actually. I was looking at the midpoint of this zone. I thought that actually hit it there. In fact, I expected it to underneath this low. Right, there's your defense. We want this to continue. Ideally, we close above the open of this. Right, we tapped above this, sweeping it. I'm actually going to leave that up, just in case. I'm going to go here. We'll get rid of that. And all this nonsense. You know, let's actually be a little bit more cautious.
Order submitted.
"15 seconds to close of this candle. You might get a trade back up to this area that had a body closure underneath here. Right, but this is moving lower pretty quick. There's your trigger at the midpoint. You want follow through now, or it's a smallish stop. This is chopping around at our area of interest we want it to go. Otherwise, we could be looking at lower prices. We'll see. Closing inside. We're getting a lot of chop at this mid 50 area. I think at minimum we trade above this candle at 59. But cautious of that imbalance there. If we tap and then have a strong reaction from it. Okay, into our SNDR here. Cool.
Target filled.
Expansion, expansion, expansion. Let's go. Let's go, let's go, let's go. Right. Traded right back into here. We had that strong movement from it. Right, still looking for at least up here in the 80s. We're getting some major bearish movement, but still involved, of course. But we seem to be stalling a little bit. Nice, Stallone. Let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go. I don't want to see major failure above this candle. And the only reason I mention that is because of how hard the algorithm sold off from there. Squeeze. Pretty good stalling. I don't think this bear bar is going to be enough unless they really accelerate it down now. Ooh.
Order submitted.
Let's go. Let's go. right? So there's your target, but you're seeing the fruits of people piling in short and achieving nothing. Achieving nothing, right? I'm down to runners now. And if we continue on, I don't like this failure. But that said, I really don't like this for a high. There is a possibility of trading back into the midpoint of this, which would coincide probably with the pocket of this move at 90, right? 89.25 and 90. Likely a lot of volume there. Right? So like, to reiterate, we had a lot of multiple mitigations here. By multiple mitigations, I mean bounce, 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 right? Trades through it, trades back into it. Whereabouts? Whereabouts are we expecting to trade to minimum from here? The midpoint of this zone. Is it a valid zone? Yes, it is. Right? Does that align with anything? Probably. Right? Happy feet. You just got your 90. Right? You're probably good to let this go, assuming that we continue on with this delivery, but I'm taking mine off here as I've got to run away. Right? But otherwise, you're just following lows up. Okay. I will see you guys in a little bit.